Hello BookTube, I am back again with a new video and today I'm going to be doing the Brandon Sanderson tag, and I was kindly tagged by Ross of Scandinavian About the Books. Thank you very much for the tag. And the original tag was created by Christy Lewis of Dostoevsky in Space, and I will leave the link of course down below as is traditional. So it's kind of slightly ironic to do a Brandon Sanderson tag, because although I enjoy fantasy as a genre, I have actually never read any of Brandon Sanderson's books. But fortunately the questions don't directly involve his books, so I'll be able to answer them anyway, and who knows, sometime in the future I will finally get around to reading some Sanderson. I know, I'm missing out there. Anyway, let's go on to the questions. The first question is: Brandon wrote many early novels while working as a night clerk at a Provo hotel. What book kept you reading late into the night? So it's been a long time since I've really been reading late into the night, kind of with how my daily schedule works, and when I do my reading that doesn't happen that much anymore. But in the past, Robin Hobb was always good for that. Her books, really suck you in, and you find yourself reading them, and then you finish reading and go, what time is it? What happened? What did I miss? Yes, Robin Hobb was good for that. And I think the most recent book that didn't keep me reading necessarily late into the night, but kept me reading for far longer than I'd initially been planning to have my reading session, was Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers, which also just really sucked me into the world and didn't let me go. Question number 2 is: Brandon's complex magic system set his fantasies apart. What subject do you love to read about in all of its complexity? Many really. I'd almost say I enjoy complexity in all forms. Just about any subject, right? Once you start reading about it, you find out it's not as simple as that. And I think it's valuable to recognize that simplicity is a rare thing. And to appreciate nuance and complexity more, especially these days where, not everything can be explained in a single tweet. And I think we should appreciate those kind of nuances more. But in terms of subjects, history, I enjoy science, religion, my whole non-fiction and history shelves over there. And all of those, even something like ice, you think, well, ice, it's frozen water, how complex can it be? Well, you can fill a 500-page book just about ice, literally frozen water. So anything really. Alright, then, question number 3. Brandon gets his book ideas from watching other storytellers fail to execute the concept well. He figures out how to do it better. What 2 books handle the same concept in strikingly different ways, and which do you prefer? I find it a bit difficult to really pinpoint a book, but the ones I settled on the end was Bowl Away by Elizabeth McCracken, which I reviewed some time ago, and I'll see if I can find that video, drop a link down below. And Chintu, if being informed is the correct pronunciation, by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. Both are kind of like family epics, following multiple generations of the same family and how their lives go. And Chintu is by far the superior book in executing that, at least in my view. I don't even remember much about Bowl Away, but I just didn't connect with the characters. The events seemed kind of pointless and somewhat arbitrary, whereas Chintu really helped you and you got a whole bunch of engaging characters, and you kind of got to see insights into the history of Uganda and how that was experienced by people in different positions. So, in that way, Chintu is by far the superior in execution of that concept. Then, question number 4. Child Brandon was recommended several books about dogs that die. As a result, he became a reluctant reader. Please share a formative good or bad childhood reading experience. So my most formative experience is something I've heard secondhand, because I was too young to remember it. But apparently when I was very young, 2 or 3 or so, my parents used to read me bedtime stories, and there was a big book. I remember it being pink and really big at summer. My parents stole, I think. I need to track it down one of these days. It was called the Children's Bedtime Stories or something like that. But anyway, I wanted the same story. Apparently, it was a period where I insisted that the same story be read to me each and every night. It was a story about an inn that had a magic horn that would blow if somebody tried to pay with fake coinage, and then some of the innkeepers, or some of the guests at the inn decided to test this out by paying with fake coins, and indeed the horn blew. So, really riveting plot. But anyway, for some reason, I wanted this story read to me every night. And my parents said that at one point they came across me during the day sometime with the book on my lap, open to the correct page, and I was reading the story. I couldn't actually read yet, but I just heard the story often enough that I basically had it memorized and could kind of follow along more or less on which page we were and where on the page I was. So I guess that was what set me off on my reading journey. And I'm glad to still be on it. Alright, question number 5. Brandon and several friends host the Writing Excuses podcast, and they frequently invite guests. Please tell us about the collaborative fiction project and what you thought of it. Well, actually the first one I want to pick is only in part a fiction project, but it's The Science of Discworld, and actually I think in the end there are 4 of these books, which is a collaborative fiction / non-fiction project featuring Terry Pratchett of Discworld fame, and it's also Science of Discworld, and Ian Stewart and Jack Cohen, who are, I think, a mathematician and a biologist, if memory serves. But basically, Ian Stewart and Jack Cohen wrote a non-fiction book about evolution and about the rise of humanity, a bit in the vein of, what his name is so popular now, Yuval Harari. Was it Homo Deus and Sapiens? I haven't read those books. From what I hear, a lot of the ideas have also been formulated in these series of books, about the importance of storytelling and such. And Terry Pratchett kind of wrote a Discworld story that illustrates the non-fiction, or the non-fiction illustrates the Discworld story, whichever way around you want to view it. And basically they're alternating fiction and non-fiction chapters. So some of the science in here is slightly outdated in the sense that we've made new discoveries, especially like when they talk about exoplanets. We know about far more than the handful that were known when the time this book was written, but still well worth the read, and it's nice to kind of see how the fiction and non-fiction play off of each other. But if we want a pure fiction project, we're still going to be with Terry Pratchett, but in this case with Neil Gaiman. And Good Omens, which is a kind of satirical book about the apocalypse, the end of the world, and a angel and a demon who work together to prevent it. There's also now a television series or streaming series on Amazon Prime, which I've seen the first 4 episodes of, and I really enjoyed. And also the book was really good. I must admit I don't remember too much about it. I remember it being funny. I don't know how much it really had to say beyond that, but it's definitely an enjoyable read, and I guess I need to have another read of it again. Alright, number 6. Brandon's first book, White Sand Prime, was rewritten and eventually converted into a graphic novel called White Sand. What book would you like to see in another format? That is a good question. I don't usually think too much about that. If I read a book and I enjoy the reading experience and I'm happy with it, so I don't know if there necessarily is a book where I think, I wish they would make a movie out of it, right? Because the movie always disappoints. Not always. There are good movies, like I've had quite a few Jane Austen adaptations which I've enjoyed. But I don't think off the top of my head that there really is I'm sure there are books that, if they got adapted, I would enjoy them, but there isn't really a book where I think, I really wish they'd make it into a movie or into a graphic novel or into a play, or I guess like Lincoln in the Bardo could work well as a play, for example. So, sorry I don't have a better answer for that one, but onward to question number 7. Brandon writes very quickly. What prolific author or authors would you recommend? Well, if you watched Scully Dangling About the Books tag video, you're going to notice a theme here. But definitely Terry Pratchett. He was a very prolific author. I think he wrote something 40 odd books in 30, 35 years. So about one a year, maybe even slightly more than 1 year is Discworld series. And at some point I'll do a video on the Discworld series and where to start. That's always a contentious issue. But yeah, that's definitely my recommendation. So if you've heard about Discworld, you probably know it's a parody series, right? And you know, making fun of fantasy. And it's true, especially for the first couple of books, that they're kind of more about the humor. But the later books, although they're still funny, I think Terry Pratchett has more and more to say about the state of our world and more social critique, which really comes through in a lot of kind of very thoughtful things to say about our current world. So if you're put off by the first couple of Discworlds, because they were just too funny and fluffy, but nothing of substance in there, then I'd say skip ahead to, for example, as a standalone, Small Gods. Is probably one of the best starts, which has a lot to say about religion. Also, with the recent occurrences, Black Lives Matter protests, Night Watch has a lot to say about policing and the role of police forces and the correct ethical behavior of police officers. Both can be read as standalones. Night Watch is part of a longer sub-series within the Discworld series. I'll explain that maybe at some point in the future. But you can both read them as standalones, and they move a lot beyond just making fun of fantasy novels, which, unlike the first couple of Discworld books. Okay, then, series number 8. Brandon's Cosmere Universe books are grounded in Platonic philosophy. What book or series gets you really excited about the source material? Basically, books on African history have got me quite excited. So there's, of course, well, you've seen my recent video, possibly, otherwise it's in the channel, about Out of Darkness, Shining Light, or it's about Chintu, which kind of touch on, especially Out of Darkness, Shining Light, Chintu only a little bit, about kind of the history of Africa pre-colonization, which I know next to nothing about, and which I would really like to know more about. But I've noticed, like, I recently went to the bookshop, and then if you go to the history section in the Africa shelf, it's all colonialism and post-colonialism. Like, there are lots of books on the scramble for Africa, and possibly on the struggle for independence in Africa and post-colonial history, but very little on the pre-colonial history. Right? And especially the Greeks and the Romans already traded with East Africa. And there's centuries of Arab traders, or millennia even, and the Indian Ocean trade in general is something I would like to learn more about. So, question number 9. Brandon loves to show multiple sides of every issue and to contrast character values. Please share a book that handles controversy well. And there's a couple of books I had in mind for that. So one that I've never seen discussed before on BookTube, so that might be nice to highlight, is In God We Doubt by John Humphreys, well known to listeners of BBC Radio 4. Subtitle also says it already, Confessions of a Failed Atheist. Humphreys is an agnostic, and in this book he kind of describes his own religious questionings. So especially focuses on let's say, the Abrahamic religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And he feels to be fully convinced by any of them. But at the same time, he still believes in something, right? Atheism doesn't do it for him. And I recognize that a lot. And so In God We Doubt is really about his kind of vacillation between atheism and religion, and kind of settling somewhere in the middle, where which you can rightfully criticize maybe as being a very vague position, but it's the one that works for Humphreys, and I guess also the one that works for me. And it's an interesting read. So it's not it's not something like God Illusion, where or an atheist book really trying to convince you that God doesn't exist. But he's not fully convinced about the existence of God or about any of the religions and what they say about God being right, let's say. So a very interesting perspective on that. And more briefly, or to kind of tie into that, Small Gods is also a very interesting exploration of religion and belief in a God versus adherence to a religion and organized religion. So I think also dealt with that very well. And finally, I'd say The Dispossessed, which is about how to organize society and about capitalism, communism, and anarchism, especially capitalism versus anarchism, or communistic anarchism, which is dealt with very well in the book, and you can also put a link to my review of The Dispossessed down below. But Le Guin paints an anarchist society, but also paints it in such a way that as a reader you can clearly see also the downsides of the society. It's from the viewpoint of people who grew up in that society, so who are strong believers in it, but it's clear that it's not a perfect society by any means. So, again, highly recommended. Question number 10. Brandon Sanderson is a writing teacher, and unlike some writing teachers, he posts his lectures online for free. What free literature resource are you grateful for? The one I would most highly recommend is the Literature and History podcast. Okay, leave a link down below. And as it says, it's a podcast about literature and history. It's now up to about 70 episodes, starting in the very beginning of the first writings and with Babylonian and Sumerian epics, and then moving on through Egypt and classical Greece and Rome. And he's now also the Old Testament, and he's now just started his series on the New Testament. It's really an in-depth discussion, really thoughtfully structured, so that you can. It's designed to be listened to kind of in the background where you're doing other things, but so kind of repeating things often enough that you can things stick in your mind even if you didn't catch it the first time round, without really without becoming repetitious. He really goes in depth on all these works of literature, so you get the story of as it's told in the work itself, but also kind of the background and the historical circumstances that can help you interpret and understand the context in which these works were created. So yeah, highly recommended. Go check it out. And that was already the last question, so all that remains for me to do is to tag some people. And I would like to tag David of The Optimist and Scott O'Neill of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. If you have the time and inclination, then please do this tag. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.